Welcome back to the show, you guys. I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. Her name is Jessica Depatie. She specializes in what we know as shadow work, but so much more too. She is a brilliant woman who we talk about astrology, we talk about shadow work, we talk about this thing called the 64 archetypes of humanity. And we really go down and get nitty gritty into this whole spiritual practice that we're all waking up to right now. We talk about plant medicines, the use and the cautions with these plant medicines in order to produce our own awakening. And most importantly, we talk about how we can, as a humanity, as individuals first, but as a collective, raise our vibrational state and raise our frequency. And she just produces and brings to light so many valuable tools. Honestly, even if you just took one of her many tools that she'll present, will present together, your life will be changed, and you will grow. You will experience enlightening, and begin seeing the world and yourself in a new way. And I'm just extremely excited for you to listen to this episode. Please enjoy this episode with Jessica Depatie, and all the information that we discuss will be linked in the show notes. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Ignite the Spark Within, a podcast designed to do just that. Ignite your spark within you. I'm your host, Sarah Malone, owner of Spark Fitness and Lifestyle Coaching, and voted Yahoo Finance's top 10 female coaches to follow in 2021. I believe everyone has a fire inside them, a powerful purpose, a story waiting to be told, and everyone can uncover and unleash this power. Every day you have the choice to either let your experiences shape you or take control and use your experiences to shape the world around you. You were made to experience happiness, freedom, joy, purpose, love, passion, and abundance. Disrupt the status quo, think for yourself, and join forces with those around you doing the same. Join me for thought-provoking conversations along with the strategies needed in order to help you ignite your spark within. All right, Jessica, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited for this episode. It comes at a very timely time for not only me, but for the state of the world that we're in right now. You deal specifically with shadow work, which is being talked about a lot. Can you just briefly tell us your process for helping people achieve transformation, basically by helping them through this shadow work that we call? And what is it? What the heck is shadow work?
What is this stuff? Yeah. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so excited. I recently listened to the one with Kyle Kingsbury that you did, which was so good.
Oh, that was a good episode.
Yeah. So many knowledge bombs in that one. So let's see if I can top it. It's competitive here.
I like that. I like the healthy competition. That's okay.
Screw you, Kyle.
And I just want to challenge now everybody. I'm like, let's see if you can top the Kyle Kingsbury podcast.
Okay, I already can't. But yeah, shadow acknowledged. So yeah, let's just dive into shadow work. We can start off with some definitions, because I think when we talk about this stuff, for me at least, it's helpful to dive into these specifics. Let's build our box, and then we can explode out of it.
Absolutely. I love that.
So shadow work, it is something that's trending right now, something that we're hearing more and more about, but it's been around for ages. Yeah. I mean, archetypally, and as far as the human experience goes, it's been around ever since we've likely developed our prefrontal cortex, that thing that makes us aware of our awareness, that confusing bit of our makeup that makes life so exciting and also kind of weird sometimes. And I would say that
word to use for it.
The term shadow work was coined, I believe, initially by Carl Jung. Now, I'm not a trained Jungian analyst or student by any means, but the concepts of shadow work from that era, from that practice, is really relevant to what we're talking to today. If you guys want to check out more about Jungian psychology specifically, check out Dr. Danielle McGinnis. You can find her on Instagram. She has a great podcast called The Embodied Podcast. But my the way that I do shadow work is more from an Eastern approach. It's from what's called the gene keys. And so the gene keys initially, well, it started back with the I Ching. It's one of the oldest texts known to man. And it originally was something that was used for oracle readings. And it's still used like that today. It's a really great tool. But that on top of astrology and modern sciences and the Kabbalah, it created this really cool synthesis of what we know now as the gene keys, which is 64 archetypes of humanity. And when we dive into each of these archetypes, we resonate with some more than others, but we have all of them within us. And one of the cool things about doing this type of shadow work is that it can very specifically show you what shadows you're working with, and I'll define that in a second, and what they transform into. They have very specific transformations. So if you're dealing with confusion, which I would love to dive into this one because I think it's a really big one for today. The shadow of confusion transforms into imagination. So it's not even knowing the answer, which I think is a very common thing that we want when we're feeling confused. When we're vibing higher, which is the gift state of that shadow, we can experience the fun of playing around with information in our minds in a way that's creative rather than trying to find that answer. So let me back up. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. Shadow work. Shadow work itself is this practice of diving into the parts of ourselves that we can't see consciously or that we're ignoring. These are things about ourselves that cause us distress. We just don't want to look there. Often shadows are easier seen by other people. So if you see people and you're like, wow, that person just talks too much, and they make things way more complicated. You're seeing their shadow, but they may not be aware of it themselves. So looking into your own is quite the journey, right? Like
it is, and it's very hard to do because your instinct is to turn away from it. And Kyle touched on this too, but it made me start thinking instantly when you become aware of your quote unquote shadow side, it's no longer in the shadow. It's in the shadow because it's unseen, it's unknown. And I just had a thought while you were going into that to correlate this to something physical. I like to think of the shadow side kind of like the moon, because if you think about it, there's one side that's illuminated. There's one side that has the shadow, and it's cast, and it's like, it's there, it's very present, and it's necessary to make up the atmosphere of the moon, but you can't see it.
That's amazing. I love that.
And then flip side is what creates that shadow is the sun. It's the light. So it's like this interesting, all of these things are always what's the word I'm looking for? Having a brain fart.
Well, it's the wholeness of the human experience.
The polarity. The polarities. Yes. Yeah. So please continue. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, if I could add on to that, metaphors, I love working with metaphors, especially with this kind of work that can feel conceptual.
Yes.
One of the ones that I like to use is like having food in your teeth, or like you have spinach in your teeth and you're not aware of it. Everybody else can say it. And every once in a while, you'll have that friend or something that's really close to you that will bring it up. And you're like, motherfucker, I've just been walking around my
people just mocked me and nobody said a thing. Yeah.
Right. And then sometimes it's like you feel that shame and embarrassment of, wow, everyone saw this and I didn't even see this about myself. What does that say about me? So there's a lot of spiraling off that shadow work can take you on. And so I think when we dive into this, we can go through some frameworks that can help us understand the path of least resistance and how to go through it gently. Because it's everything we dislike about ourselves. It's the things that cause us pain that we don't want to look at, that we distract ourselves from, like you were saying. And so, but the cool thing is when we start to look at the shadow and understand it, all kinds of things come to us. The shadows, totally. They literally contain the gifts of why we're here. All of our strengths are contained in these gifts. I was just on a podcast with Angelo Cisco, and he brought up a great metaphor, like a story, Forrest Gump, right? He had the break. I actually haven't seen the movie, but he's explain this to me.
So gonna have a bunch of people just ripping you apart right now. What? You haven't seen Forrest Gump?
I know, right? So, he has the braces on his legs, and is it Jenny? She's like, run, Forrest, run, when these bullies are coming at him.
Yes,
and he starts running, and his mind wasn't working. It was just his physicality. It was just, this thing that held him back, that once he was like, no more, I just have to go for it.
Yep.
These things fell off of him, and his biggest weakness became his greatest strength throughout his whole career. So that's what we're diving into today.
Yeah. And so I want to tangent off one way before we go into more of the in-depth, the archetypes. And I love that you said about Carl Jung, because he's so like, everyone's quoting him now. And I find it interesting how, truth, real truth with a capital T, withstands the test of time. And what we're seeing now is all of these ancient philosophies that have been buried, and in some cases married with others, is, truth is the truth. You can translate it to different cultures or different regions, but it's all going to root back to the same source. And I find it truly beautiful that this is what we're experiencing now in this awakening, this new golden age that we're entering. I wanted to talk about two things, because it's like this shadow is an interesting concept, because you're right, it is big, it's super conceptual, and it's like, how do you tangibly how do you even say, okay, I'm going to do this shadow work? Well, you kind of can't do that. But what I found is going through shadow work myself, and like you said, it is not a very fun process. It's like, you go down a bunch of little rabbit holes in your own brain. But what I'm finding is there's two ways to become aware of it. Is others can tell you, and you can choose to be receptive to it, and you can be like, is that true about me? Like, is that true? I should dive into that. Or what I'm seeing from myself, Jessica, is what I dislike or what triggers me in other people is illuminating my own shadow side. I'm like, why is that bothering me so much? Like, what is it about this trait? Do I have that in myself? And doing like a self-analysis.
I prefer that second one, if I'm honest with you.
Me too.
We can dive into, and we will dive into, how to do the work solo, but in relationship, that is the greatest teacher to show us what we're dealing with.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because it all comes down to wanting to feel more love and joy and peace and adventure in our lives.
Yes.
Right? But we want to bypass and go straight to the higher states, but there's no next day Amazon Prime delivery when it comes to this stuff, but it can be fun, like there's no shortcut, but it can be fun. So, I just recently, this was a couple months ago, put out a solo show, on my podcast, the Shadow Work Library, around racism. This is a time where, speaking specifically to your point around getting triggered by other people, right around the time when people were putting the black tile up, Black Lives Matters was at the forefront of many news feeds. And we're all faced with, how am I contributing to this? Yes. Why am I feeling triggered by this? All these very confusing questions are coming up. And with all that finger pointing, I just felt like there was something to look at there. It's one thing to say that systemic racism is wrong. Yeah, no shit. But let's look below the surface, because looking at that surface level stuff just causes more anger and weirdness.
Yes.
So the shadow that I was looking at specifically was the shadow of indifference. And that is what I would say the majority of the world at that time was feeling, which was, I get that I want to do something about this, but I kind of don't know what to do. And therefore, I'm just going to blame somebody else and say it's their fault.
And then not do anything.
Mm-hmm. And even the state of inaction, that's okay too. But let's dive into why, right? And so when we look at shadow work from the Gene Keys perspective, there's a reactive expression of a shadow and a repressive manifestation of a shadow, repressive and reactive. And usually you'll resonate more with repressive types or reactive types. And the biggest difference there is repressive people. I'm one of them. Our fear, it's all about fear. Shadow work is about fear and where it lies, and it comes in different forms. It's it's fear turned inward, and that can look like shame and guilt and not enoughness. The reactive version is fear turned outwards. That's anger, blame, and we bounce between those two things often, but usually we'll fall into like one of those two categories more dominantly. And so when I looked at the reactive version of indifference, it's this sense that, let's start with repressive, because this is the one that I think most of us can relate to. It's a fear around being different, around being seen as different. And so you can see the shadow show up when, you have this big dream, a giant ideal, something that you want to do with your life. You have this little spark that just won't go away. There's something more for yourself, but you're afraid of stepping out of bounds. You're afraid of making that identity shift. You're afraid of telling people, hey, I'm into this now. Yeah. How do you feel about that? Am I going to be rejected? Exactly. What if it goes wrong? I put myself out there, people are going to think I'm weird. And it all these shadows stem from a very primal area in our DNA. So we can look back into tribal times. If you were weird and different, you might be ostracized, and that
might be out of the tribe. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
It's a very real, very old part of ourselves, and it should be acknowledged. And we live in a different time now, but the truth is we still have this ancient wiring that we're needing to navigate. So that's kind of an acceptable shadow. But when you look at the reactive version of that shadow showing up, it's not liking people that are different,
Yes. Oh, so, yeah.
And you can see how they're the same. If you're afraid of being different, then there's a little part of you that doesn't like when people are different. And so with all this finger pointing around racism and all of that, it's like we have to look inwards, and exactly what you're saying. If I'm being triggered by this, how am I not living in my fullest, in my gift states? In that case, how am I being indifferent with my own dreams? And how is that rippling outwards? And how are other people reacting to that?
Yes.
Reactive and repressive, one's not good, one's not bad. It's just the repressives get this nice person kind of facade. Oh, well, at least they're keeping their shit internally and they're not putting on me. That's not true either. Those people are still creating systems and going home to their families and stuff.
Yes. And those people are still creating harm in the structure of humanity, because they're so caught up in this internal system not being right that they're not creating a safe external environment for those around them, even if it's passive.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I mean, I didn't even think about those two concepts, but you see it now. You're right, in the racism more than anything. And what I find particularly encouraging is the right questions are now being asked. Like, how do we contribute to this? How can we solve this? And it's like, finally, I think we're as a humanity well past the days of saying, well, this happened in this time, and just getting angry to be angry and just lashing out about it. That doesn't accomplish anything. And I think we know that, even though we still do it sometimes. But asking those questions is going to allow better answers to come forth, so we can actually make a change in racism, but everything else too. So I love that. Beautiful.
Yeah. Something that came to me while you're saying that was, I'm not exactly sure where this stemmed from, but you had mentioned earlier, we right now have this great opportunity to look at different times in history and different philosophies that we wouldn't have had this easy access to even just 20, 30 years ago, without having to go to school or buy, an expensive encyclopedia thing that's written by somebody that has its own biases.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think maybe it's Darwinism or something, this concept that we're all evolving. Therefore, maybe that implies that people that came before us were not as smart as we are, or not as in tune. And so that is like one of my greatest passions, is looking back at the past to find what they can help us with now. Because like you were saying, people are asking the right questions right now. And also there is a split of consciousness happening. This has been predicted by the yogis for centuries.
You got it.
And you can see two very distinct groups of people.
Yes.
Some people really trying to uphold what's been happening, and some people that are exploring what's next while also diving into the past. So it's an interesting time to be alive, to say the least.
I for one, and I'm sure you feel the same, feel extremely blessed to be alive during this time where we're witnessing such a phenomena. I remember, Jessica, just real briefly before we move on, um, is I think months ago, maybe even last year, I had this weird like little vision where, like you said, this separation, and I saw this almost like oil being separated. You know, the oil separates. Um, and the frequencies of some are rising while the others are actually lowering their vibrational state with certain mind frames and habits and lifestyles. And I saw on this earth, it was like a shadowy earth with shadowy figures, and the ones that were rising were like these golden giant figures. And then you start to learn about golden ages and all of these things, and I'm like, that makes sense why that vision would come through, because it does say in the golden ages that it will be a time of adversity and oneness of many different cultures and languages, and it's beautiful, really, because it's going to bring a lot of people together. And I actually don't know if I agree with the statement made by whoever you quoted that those from long ago aren't as intelligent, or what was it, intelligent?
Yeah, just this idea that people from the past are like savages, more or less.
Yeah. And you know what? I kind of disagree. I think maybe the ways of operating and living were different. But to me, actually, I think they're probably more intellectually sound because they were closer to the source of creation. And the further you get away from the source of creation, the more diluted or potentially mistranslated it can become. So I think they know more than we do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just think about I almost said simple, the concept of intuition,
It is simple. And that's why it's so brilliant.
It's simple. And it's also this thing that we make so complicated.
Oh,
if I can't logically explain why I feel this way, then it's invalid. It's insane, right?
Yes.
That's something that I think people from the past didn't really have to deal with. So, yeah.
Technology. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the 64 archetypes. This fascinates me because I didn't know this. This is one thing, in exploring my own spirituality. This is something I did not know of. So what is this concept?
Okay. So let's get into the practical first. If you go to genekeys.com, you can find, if you have your birth information, because it works with planetary alignments in some aspects.
Yes.
Your birth time, birthplace, and where you were born and date. I don't know if I said that, but basically all of your birth information, you plug it in and it'll show you your profile. And so we have these 12 or 13, gosh, I study this stuff every day. I haven't really counted the bubbles, but 12 or 13 primary gifts and shadow states that will be very dominant in your design. And so we have a sphere, a category of life's work. This is where you meet the outside world. If we wanted to talk about it on a business context, this is like your brand. It's how people see you. It's how you interact. If we then follow this golden path to the next category, it takes us into your evolution. So this is your life's most consistent challenge. And it's the one where you have a big breakthrough. That's when things really start to get rolling, and it's only step 2 of like 13. So I spent an entire year on that first category because it's a lifetime of study if you want to. If you have the time and space to really dive into this stuff, like I had that opportunity. I was lucky enough to quit my job and maybe be let go from my job and move to a new country. And I was like, okay, I'm going to dive into this. So it was great.
Really?
But yeah, it doesn't have to be that intense. A lot of the stuff can run in the background of your life, right? That's the thing about shadow work. It's like, once you get that insight and that teaching, life will test that lesson, right? By your partner, by your kids, by your friends, your foes.
Oh, yeah.
Look right in front of you. That's the test.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So, we have all these different categories where you can look into different life areas, where your core wound is. So my personal example, my core wound is a 40.4, and it is the shadow of exhaustion and the gift of resolve. And so basically that means like boundaries are a huge huge issue for me. It's my core wound. It's what I came into the world with. It's like genetic wounding. It's some old stuff,
Ancestral wounding. Yeah. Yeah. Chains and chains. Yeah.
So it can literally tell you that kind of information. And even though it seems like, well, this is too good to be true, it is in a way, because it really does take contemplation. The Gene Keys are written in a way that it's very contemplative. It won't ever tell you the answers. It's really, really nice read.
Isn't that the way the universe works, though?
Totally. And by knowing that, and then we have lines, right? So 0.4 for that sphere, it's about rejection. So if I combine exhaustion and rejection, that's a really good bit of information to know, because when I'm in my vibing low, maybe you haven't eaten well, haven't slept well, all those base needs just like out of whack, which does happen, we're humans. I can find myself feeling exhausted, feeling this internal, like I'm feeling like I just want to reject people before they reject me, that whole shindig. And to notice myself and to be the observer in that state is really, it's one of the biggest things. Not take on that persona, not take on that character as this is me, to observe it, write it out with grace. And then when you're in your higher states, that's when the real work comes in, where you can observe that and be like, okay, in my case, what boundaries did I feel were crossed? Where did I enable this situation to go wrong? And it's a constant peeling of an onion. Our minds can be opened very quickly to new insights and mental stimulation and new ideas. But our hearts and our souls, when we're talking about shadow work, they peels, it's like slow, layer after layer, feels it out. And that's another concept that we need to acknowledge in today's day and age, where we just like want to bypass some of that longer period of stuff.
So glad you said that, because there's a couple of things. So first, let me touch on the one that I thought of when you were saying that. What it sounds like with your 40.4 is the fear of rejection can sometimes drive you to lack the necessary boundaries, which then takes too much energy from you and you find yourself exhausted.
Oh yeah.
I totally relate to that, by the way.
It's like we're being a good person, especially being women. It's like, that's how we were brought up. Be good, be nice, do more than people do for you. And then here we are. It's like, okay.
Do more, period. More. It's like, yeah. And so I totally relate to that, by the way. And I just overwork myself all the time. And then I'm like you just said before this podcast, you're like face planted on the couch for a week.
Totally. And I saw it happening and I was like, okay, it's like the lifted community, right? Negation acknowledged, shadow acknowledged.
Yes, exactly. And thank God for good people in my life. I truly believe that I've been assigned certain protectors who remind me, Sarah, breathe. It's okay to breathe. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yes, it's real.
Oh, it is. You're right. The world's not falling down. And then there was another thought I had in that was, this need for the peeling of the onion that you spoke of. I'm really glad you brought that up, because you're right. Information comes in so fast and all of a sudden the awareness is made. And I think us humans can get caught in this trap of saying like, well, I'm aware of it now. Why am I not changing it? I keep doing the same thing over and over again. And it's like, there's an integration period that needs to happen. Give yourself grace, but also give yourself the space to allow that integration to happen. Don't just keep running through life after you've been made aware of something very pivotal for your life's journey. And then just thinking that you can, now that I know it, I'm just going to change. Everything's going to change for me. It does. You're right. It takes peeling back and sitting with yourself. And that, I think, is the part that people miss. I think they get information just fine. It comes in. And then it's like, how do I integrate this now to create true change?
Collecting more information can be a source of coping and distraction. I can only speak to this stuff because I've gone through it all. That's the thing about getting into whatever vocation you've chosen to be your life's work, is like life will test you to make sure you know what you're talking about.
Yes.
So yeah.
I love that.
I think that the biggest thing that people are struggling with today, myself included, is limbic stress. I'll go through a little bit of brain science as I understand it, as modern scientists understand it now, which is always changing. So I throw science out there kind of like,
hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the show. Hey, I'm going to make this
That's
really
a very
quick.
good point to make.
On
Thank you.
October 20th
but
through the
limbic stress is the biggest
23rd, if
enemy
you are a
of our
woman,
quality
or
of
even if
life.
you're a man
Maybe
who knows a
beyond
woman,
environmental stresses,
any woman
like
that would
external
benefit from
things
this
that are
experience,
happening,
I'm hosting a retreat
without
with
our
my
ability
dear
to
friend
clear it,
Kim
we're
Egger
constantly
in
functioning
Arizona
at a very
in the
small
beautiful
fraction
and
of our
spiritual
potential.
Red Rocks
And
of
it has us
Sedona.
living with this
We are very
constant
excited to bring this retreat.
calmness,
I've been hard at
Charlie
work at
Brown
creating the
smoke
content for
cloud
this
of
retreat for the
anxiety or
past
unhappiness
2
or
years, ever
frustration.
since the pandemic
Even
hit.
if it seems like
And
it
what I
should be good
realized
for
is that
you, like
these
collecting
women,
information,
all people really,
information
but
overload,
right now we're focused on the
over-exercising,
healing of
over
the divine
dieting,
feminine.
over anything.
And
Like,
this is really just going to
so
provide a space for
limbic system,
growth,
I'm
for
not even sure.
healing,
It's like
for rest and
it's in your brain,
reprieve,
right?
as that is desperately what we need right
ton
now.
of functions.
And
Like,
the
She pointed to the
content
back
and
of
the
her head, by the way.
guidance
Yeah.
of
It's in there
somebody
somewhere.
facilitating an actual
this
growth
limbic
experience
system, it's-
instead of
it
leaving
stores
you out in the
longer-term
cold.
memories,
You know, if,
pleasure,
if
pain.
traditional
It's our
therapy
ability to
doesn't appeal
regulate
to you,
emotion,
which it doesn't
and the
appeal
reason
to
why it
most,
exists is to
then
keep us
this is a
safe,
great
more or
way
less.
to experience the healing and transformational experience that something like that can offer you, but in a place where it's completely away from your normal routine, family, friends, and environment. It is a chance to connect with other women that are like-minded and on the same pursuit as you. And we're just going to spend 3 nights together in the beautiful Red Rocks of Arizona, healing, growing, doing the work, meditating, doing breath work, and exploring nature. So if this calls to you, if this appeals to you, we have limited spots available for this retreat, and we're just so excited to bring it to you. So you can email me at sarah@sparkflc.com or at any of the links in my social media bios. You'll find a link there to book a connection call with me, just to make sure that this retreat truly is for you. I also wanted to make an announcement of our sponsors of the show and just thank them. First sponsor is Spark Fitness and Lifestyle Coaching, my baby. This is a holistic health and wellness company that has expanded over the years to include things like Reiki and energy healing, guided and channeled meditations. We do activations of spiritual gifts. We also offer live in-person events for women only and for men and women, like the yoga and sound bowl healing sessions and the full moon women's gathering. There is so much to offer in this one space: fitness, nutrition, holistic healing, you name it, and it's going to be covered under mind, body, and spirit with Spark. And I'm very honored to partner with other partners and investors now to be able to sponsor this show. Our next sponsor, Juice Plus. I've said it and I've said it ad nauseum now that I am not a huge supplement fan, but Juice Plus captured my attention with its ability to bring an immunity aspect to me and help me to function at a higher level, which I was shocked to find out that we are recommended to consume 9 to 16 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And I don't know about you, but that's a lot of food to consume. And with our busy lifestyles, which I'm not condoning, by the way, it can be hard to consume that much food. So what's cool about Juice Plus is that all of this is holistic. It is legitimately powdered fruits and vegetables in a capsule, so you don't have to drink a nasty fruits and greens powder. They also come in gummies if you're not a pill swallower. I don't mind it, so I do the reds, the greens, and the purples, and their fish oil, their omega blend. And I have to say, aside from just taking care of my health, which sometimes can be unseen and unfelt, I legitimately feel a difference in my ability to recover, in my health and vitality and energy. And it's almost like a space is created in your system and you just feel like things are more oxygenated, which, come to learn, that's its sole purpose, to oxygenate your system. So as an athlete and as a workhorse, even if you don't work out strenuously, even if you just live a lifestyle in which you're working a lot, you're creating what's called oxidative stress in your system. And oxidative stress can be very detrimental. It's what reduces your immunity. It's what causes inflammation. It's what harms recovery and muscle building. among other things. So Juice Plus has been a huge crutch and an important aspect in my own journey, not just athletic endeavors, but health as well. So if you need any more information on those, please hit the links in the show notes. They'll take you directly to Spark, the retreat page, and then Juice Plus. And hey, if this podcast is adding value to your life in any way, I just want to ask, there is a donate button. You can donate whatever, however little or as much as you want. It does not have to be recurring, but just as a thank you for, continuing to provide valuable content on this page, it really helps to keep this podcast going and just supports good quality information. You can find that link in the show notes as well. It's what began this show in the first place, and everything is welcome. At the end of the day, my mission is just to continue bringing you high quality, good conversations, a place to come to learn and hear vulnerability, and then so that you become a stronger and more capable human being as well. So anything is much appreciated to help continue this show. And before you get bored and start skipping, let's get back to the show.
It's to keep us alert to dangers, to remind us of memories from long ago when something bad happened so that you don't do it again. The problem is that a lot of those experiences were one-off or not as bad as we actually thought they were, or not relevant at all anymore. Nonetheless, our limbic brain, if we leave it unchecked, can have us looking at life through this lens of negative experiences, which have over the years turned into beliefs and thought forms that have an iron grip on our realities. So like emotions themselves, negative emotions, they aren't bad. Emotions add that spice to life. They make life worth living, exciting. A little bit of fear is great. The problem happens when unhealthy feelings get blown out of proportion, right? Think about all the times when you felt overwhelmed by sadness, anxiety, frustration, or anger. And you're repeating it. It's like this cycle of limbic stress, the mental broken record of negative emotions that you play over and over again, just torturing yourself, torturing yourself until it's ingrained in your psyche. And usually nothing actually bad is happening. It's just replaying some worry that might happen in the future over and over again. And so you can imagine living in that survival mode makes it very difficult to access intuition.
Yes.
Makes it super difficult to get a clear impression or an inner knowing about where you want to go. Especially it's like having mud all over your windshield. My teacher, Daniel Raphael, uses a great example. It's like, if you have mud on your windshield and you can't drive, you don't get a new car. You just have to clean the windshield and then you're good to go.
Brilliant. I love that. That's a really great way. And so, because I like the way that you phrased all of that, because it's very understandable and relatable for all of us. And it's like we keep adding on these pieces without clearing the space can cloud the intuition. And we know our intuition is our intuition is the knowing. Mm-hmm. It's the thinking brain that gets in the way of the knowing because of all of the things you just stated. So how does one go about making sure they're a clear vessel for getting in touch with that? Okay, here she goes. Okay, go for it.
I'm so glad we're talking about this. This wasn't on our list of things to talk about.
I know, but we're jiving. So
right. It's what's needed. I'm receiving it. Just kidding. Okay. So I would say that the first key to accessing your intuition is learning how to access the involuntary nervous system, which is the key to all biofeedback, intuitive and meditation skills. Okay. So your body has two nerve networks, voluntary and involuntary. You might remember this from high school a little, or actually people listening to this probably know this much better than from high school. The voluntary nervous system makes physical movement possible, controlled use of your physical senses. Involuntary takes care of controlling and regulating your body organs and their functions. And it's also the primary interface with the subconscious mind and your creativity. So normal conscious thought, like what we're engaged with right now, links us primarily with that voluntary nerve networks. It's allowing us to perceive and act outwardly. And because our usual experience with being Western humans, at least, is using this voluntary nervous system. That's what we're focused on. We're used to concentrating on things. We're used to trying and forcing when we're mentally directing our thoughts. Those are unfortunately the wrong approaches for accessing your subconscious space, your involuntary networks. So to access it, a new form of thinking is really needed, which needs this subtler, more gentle touch, because forcing only throws you into activating that voluntary network. So the key here is, the keynote there is like focusing, don't force, right? This is a quest, not a test. There's no doing it right or wrong when you're in your subconscious space. So you can think of it as attending an experience rather than concentrating on it. And anything that pops up for you is correct, even if it's nothingness. Is that nothingness a void? Is it expansion? Is it emptiness? Like, there's so many more words that we can add to our experience that we didn't learn. So we dive even deeper into this. There are different perceptual types when it comes to intuition. Okay, so some people are more visual, intuitively visual, like your third eye, while others perceive more through feelings or in language form. Like maybe you hear messages or you listen to just the right song at the right time, and you, for some reason, can tune into just the right bit of information there that you needed. How you most readily perceive directly affects how you access your intuition or your inner knowing most readily. So for visual people, these people tend to think in pictures or mental images. So if you're a more visually dominant person, you might say things like, I see, or I've got the picture now. And for them, holding an image in their mind or having a visual focal point is really a way that they can brainstorm best. And so for visual people, they're going to be more dominant in intuitive seeing. Mm-hmm. For feeling people, these people in the outside world tend to relate through life with feelings. So they're constantly aware of their feelings, of others' feelings. Maybe they're even affected by other people's feelings. And for them, feeling the sensations in their body is how they can get the best read on the situation or the other person or on themselves. And so you can feel maybe like this tightness in your throat if you're about to say something you feel like will be controversial, or like feeling in your gut if you feel like, yeah, this is something I need to go for, something like, I'm not feeling this right now. And then we get into audient people. So these people tend to be more analytical in their personality rather than the visual and the feeling people. So they have a louder inner dialogue and think and perceive more in language. So if this is you, this is your own inner echoing. This is the best way for you to mentally focus and process. So for audient people, they would be more dominant in that intuitive hearing. Now, it's also important to mention that you want to train all of your intuitive senses, not just the one that comes most easy to you, because the most important things in life require different perspectives. So each type of intuition gives you a different angle on what you're trying to figure out. Like if you're a feeling person, you're going to get very accurate binary, though, yes or no's. And so you can train that about yourself if you're not much of a feeler person, if you're disconnected from your body, just sitting there and being like, looking at food options on a menu. How does my body feel when I'm looking at this versus that? Binary, yes or no, and just practice, because sometimes you can convince yourself you want something, and that's where things can get tricky. That's where training comes into play. Intuition is training just like any other muscle.
So I have to tell you, first of all, wow. That was a lot of information that I feel like, ironically, intuitively, like, or I know, but I had no idea about all of that. So thank you for bringing that. It was new for me anyways. And I'm positive it was new for my audience as well.
You're welcome.
I was like finding it interesting because I don't know if this is normal. Probably is with some people, but I definitely have all three of those. Mm-hmm. And I would say one way that I thought of to get in tune with, because I think you're right. I think that a lot of people getting into the body is tough. Mm-hmm. It can be challenging because I think, quite frankly, that a lot of people don't feel safe in their own body. And so one way that I found, and maybe this is why it comes so naturally, is throughout physical activity. Mm-hmm. Like working out, even yoga, and even orgasm, sexual mm-hmm. experiences can get you back in touch with your body. and developing a safety therein. Yeah.
Totally. Let's get into that too then. So those are all ways that you access your intuition, that you can receive impressions from your inner knowing or a higher source. But then we still have that limbic stress situation, right? And that's where we need to raise our vibration. Like it's as simple as that. And fortunately, raising our vibration is kind of simple, it's one of these things that's talked about a lot that isn't very interesting anymore, but it's so key. And so I say it's not interesting, maybe because like you were saying, a lot of people will say, well, I know I need to breathe better, but really, what do I need to do? It's like, okay, no, we'll like really start there.
Yes.
There's different types of breath patterns. So in and out of the mouth, that's a really quick, kind of intense way of getting into your subconscious space, getting out of your own head, in and out of the mouth. It really has you focusing on a place that you haven't been in your conscious state when you're sprawled out everywhere and you're doing a million things.
Yeah.
A natural, relaxing breath pattern, calming one, is in through the nose, out through the mouth. It's most effective to release stress. There's something called the dream porting breath, which I also learned from Daniel Raphael, which is a
yes. I just learned this, Jessica.
So really?
I did, and it's powerful. So well, let's talk about breath work. This is powerful. And this is a tool that I recently just discovered too, as a way to tap into this. And there's just so many tools. Like meditation is huge. I always used to tell myself, oh, I can't meditate. I'm just not a meditator. That is so false. And I can tell you it is the most important thing in my life in raising vibrational state. But to breath work, I just recently did a breath workshop on Wim Hof with Brandon Powell.
Oh yeah.
And he actually used that as intertwined it with Wim Hof. It was like a ooh-ah-ee in, like, and then out or out. And that one little tweak, because I've done breath work before, and that one little tweak took it up to another level. So keep going, girl.
Well, yeah, it's like learning a staggered stance or doing like unconventional fitness. It's still moving weight. It's still your body, but it's like, whoa, I didn't know that just doing this one little thing would have it's like a portal into a different world.
Great analogy. Perfect.
Yeah. Breathwork is amazing. And the reason, I just want to back up here. The reason why I know so much about intuition is because you learn about things you suck at.
Yes.
That's usually why people dive into things. And I lived a long life of not listening to my intuition, which got me in a lot of trouble. So I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. So I really wanted to dive into this.
I relate to you a lot. Yes, me too.
Good. And I hope for anybody listening just to know, this process of diving your intuition is actually very quick. You just need to be dedicated to it and take it seriously. But it doesn't take a lot of effort. It just takes commitment.
Yes.
Those two things are different, right? Yeah.
Well said.
Another way to get yourself out of limbic stress, because limbic stress, sometimes there are things you actually have to deal with. That's not really what we're talking about here. Talking about just, I'm feeling stressed out and I don't really have a reason. Like I could create a list of reasons, but everything's actually okay. I'm just feeling like I need to get out of it. Sometimes things don't need to be processed.
You mean me?
Right. I feel you.
I mean, I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding at the same time.
Same. Talk about this because we know it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the thing called soul shifting, I learned this from, I'm not gonna be able to remember his name now. I remember what he looks like. Dang.
That's okay.
Sorry, whoever this is. I want to source you. So it's called soul shifting, and it's putting your awareness in the halo area. So if you can put your just close your eyes. Sometimes that makes it easier. Put your awareness above your head and then back a little bit and just calmly breathe into being in that space. You can feel the pureness and the simpleness of your soul. Gives you that beginning experience of feeling that fuller self without all the BS. So that's a nice way to just get yourself out of it for a moment to see if you need to go back into it, because often we don't need to go back into it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. What are we on? Raising vibration. Okay. So other things, creating a stack. So playing great music. You had mentioned moving your body, lighting a nice smelling candle. A lot of these things could be categorized as, hippy dippy bullshit, but there's a lot of science behind it. I know you're not the type of person to label it as that, but, lighting the candle, we have this smell that's activating our olfactory system to get us out of this immediate environment of chaos. It's like, I'm going to tune into a different sense proactively. It's the light, it's something else to focus on, a spark of hope.
It's again, and so let me just go back to say, and to resonate with whoever does find it hippy dippy bullshit. I actually did at one point. I had none of this, at one point in my life, I was like, oh my gosh, those crazies. I would never be into yogis, and I would never be into the monks, and I would never be into like feng shui and all of this stuff. But as you begin to be bold enough to let go of what you thought you knew, you begin to find truths in all of these things. And, whether or not you can have charged stones that put a magical force field around your house and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, what those items do is they create an atmosphere that also carries with it an energetic vibration. And if you're trying to raise your own personal vibrational state, then you need to be in more environments where it's at a higher energy state. So candles and incense and music is huge, 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 because music creates emotions. And actually, there's so much science behind, things like, even I just purchased my own, a full set of crystal singing bowls because I noticed it's a gift of mine. And there's so much power in sound, Jessica, that I found, specifically crystal bowls, because our bodies, there's crystalline structures inside. And so just tapping into these more frequently, like you said, it's the commitment, and then it just stacks. And it doesn't take a lot of things, but just the consistent lifestyle behaviors like that to tap into that intuition. So I love that.
Yeah, science is really catching up, and it's an exciting time to see proof, but also I'm also not that kind of person. I mean, it's interesting that I've been talking a lot about science on this one, on this podcast. And I think it is because I did need to go through a period where I needed to make sure I wasn't crazy. Like, I just wanted to make sure I'm not delusional. So I dipped into some stuff and I was like, science is changing every day anyway, what we think is true. So whatever, if I'm delusional, that's fine. At least it's productive.
Love you. Oh my God. It's so true. You start experiencing all these things and you're like, I think that's part of the shadow work too, because you have to question yourself. And I'm now, and then you just start questioning everything. That's such a good place to be at, because then you really discover the truth. But if you just believed everything that was coming in, you might always second guess it for the rest of your life, or you might not actually bite on the intuition when it's calling you, which I've done many times. And like you, it's sent me in the wrong path. And now I trust that thing like it is the North Star.
It's all shadow work. Absolutely. I mean, we were talking about the shadow of indifference earlier. That's my evolution sphere. That's my life's most consistent challenge, is afraid of being different. And if in that gift state, it's versatility. It's like, oh, I can learn about science and I can learn about spirituality, and everything is actually the same thing anyway. So, it becomes less about being dogmatic around a certain system and more around, is this helping me? Because if it is, I mean, there's so many placebo studies out there that show that placebos pills are more effective than most medications out there. I don't know if that's accurate, but there's something like that. Like, it only needs to be like 10, 20% more effective than placebo. And even with that, there are all these extra complications that come from that. So it's like, whatever, even if this is all crazy, it still works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and then on that note, I would say the last thing that I have in my toolbox for raising my state is calling in spiritual backup.
Absolutely.
Knowing that we are supported and that there's something greater than our physical bodies. and even something greater than our individual soul that's supporting you and me and every one of us. And so I like to work with rays of light. Another thing that I learned from Daniel Raphael, which was like Merkaba meditation. So every light, this is taken from old texts. Every ray of light has its own energy about it. So blue can be truth. I want to understand the truth of the situation. The one that I use most often is a golden white light. So I just imagine it beaming down over my head and breathing into my body. And it's this clarifying disillusionment of stories and stuff that I don't need to be thinking about anymore. Just imagining that light filling up my body. Pink is for calm and relaxation and compassion. Green is for healing. And having that intention and that visualization and really feeling it it can create miracles. And to create your own system around what you believe, around where that's coming from, is also a really fun process.
Yeah. And I think out of curiosity, what is purple?
Well, I don't actually work with purple too much. I would say that it's there's some like regality around it.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like it's a really, really high dimensional kind of light, something that taps us into something that we can't understand, just pure vibration of love. And I think that goes out. It's like the farthest reaching one in our aura. So if we're closest to our bodies, we have like this red, it's our physical body. This is where we feel our feelings. Then we get into emotional auric body. Then we get to mental auric body. And then we go out and out and out. And then we get into like atomic and I don't know what it's called. There's a lot of them. But yeah, I think that one's at the very, very edge of human understanding.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Purples I resonate with a lot. And then the golden white one too. There was a technique I was using it with a few clients and myself too, is to picture yourself. You could picture yourself wherever, but what I found helpful was to be within the universe and breathing in that white light, that crystalline white golden light, and breathing in and actually seeing it change your DNA into these crystalline structures. It's crystallizing it and purifying it, and then breathe out whatever's, what's left. And each time you take that breath of the white light in, it's crystallizing that DNA and just purifying you and radiating you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if we talk about like real life examples of miracles happening with something like that, talk about Paris Robinson, who I think you know.
Oh yeah, I just did an episode with him. Beautiful. Yep.
So he practically fully paralyzed from being shot in the chest multiple times, and he got to a point where all he could do was imagine and think. And when he felt that rock bottom of, I just want to die, which sometimes that's where we need to go. Sometimes that's the springboard up. And that's all post-traumatic growth, right? Really thriving on the other side of your adversity. All I could do was imagine his body healing itself, and with whatever modalities that he had access to at the time. Miracle happened. Among other things that he integrated as well, but like that was the start.
Yeah. And I do want to talk about post-traumatic growth here on the tail end, but what I found as the basis of everything you've brought to the table today was just the honoring of thyself, to be open to experiencing all the ways that's possible to raise our vibrational state. And then like, don't be so rigid to say that this is how you have to do it, or use whatever you need to. Sometimes all of them, sometimes just a few. I know for me, ironically, having known none of this information previously, found myself organically using every single one of these. And I actually do every single one throughout a daily basis. And so it's no wonder when people start doing these things and using these tools, whether they learned about them and they try them or just organically like myself, you go through a black hole of raising your vibrational state and raising your frequency. So I would I find encouragement to hear you say, use what is relevant for you, be open, and just honor yourself.
that's when you know things are right. There's so much information in the world. And when people have experienced great miracles in their life and pulled themselves intuitively, figured out a way to get themselves to a place where they're really thriving and role modeling for the rest of humanity what it means to be a good human, just a really good, kind, open-minded human. Those are the things that I want to study. I want to research that. I want to figure out how we can get those tools to the masses in a bigger way that's accessible, and I think that's why I do have this passion for understanding the practicality of these tools as well, because there is a huge portion of our population that are not going to resonate with words like intuition. They're not going to resonate with lighting a candle and setting an intuition or an intention. So how can we provide the proof that we've all deemed is necessary in order to change your life in the way that we've been cultured now? But like, that's a huge passion of mine.
And it's a big project to take on. One of the analogies that I know you love analogies, same here, is what we've been called to. Our assignments are the same. It's just in different areas. And it's like walking people, helping to learn how to walk people up that ladder, because you can't just be like ascension, frequency, the universe, when people are like, when people don't even want to light a candle in their home. Mm-hmm. So it is, you're right. It's a science of walking people up that ladder and trying to make it more accessible. Yes. And transformable within the collective humanity. One more thing before we talk about post-traumatic growth. I want to dive into a little bit with plant medicines, because it's a huge thing now. Everyone's talking about it. Go to the retreat, do ayahuasca, all this stuff. And for me, I'm like this miss truth bearer with the sword, and I'm just coming like, I see both extreme ends, and I'm like, okay, I believe something's in the middle always. So I think there is a time and a place for plant medicines. However, I have these cautionary flags going up for people that just, like we said, it's like, which rung of the ladder are you on? And is that rung an appropriate area to introduce plant medicines? So I know yeah.
Such a good conversation to have, for sure. So we are producing a documentary right now called Post-Traumatic Growth. And in our research, we wanted to explore altered states, because this is a really necessary tool to learn more about yourself, to get out of the 3D, Let's see what else is there. Exercise can take you to altered states. Breathwork can take you to altered states, but then plant medicine can as well, in a very intense, quick, easy to access kind of way, which does cause some problems sometimes too. I started off on this journey with ayahuasca, like hearing about ayahuasca a lot. And a lot of the conversations that I heard around it were that it really like shows you everything and fixes a lot of stuff. It just sounded too good to be true. And as I went through my first experience in 2019 in Nosar, Costa Rica at the Combo Casita, which was this really beautiful, intimate, they don't have more than 10 people there at a time, really, which was really important to me. That was my intuition, being like, I don't want to do this in a group of 50 people, 100 people.
Yes.
So we found this amazing medicine woman there, and I went through my first experience, and I did feel like, okay, I went to the depths of hell. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but that was my intention going into it too. I mean, call me crazy, but I wanted to get more into shadow work. I wanted to understand the depths of where our psyches can go. I wanted to understand rock bottom. Even though I've had my own versions of rock bottom, I really wanted to understand the full scope of it. I wanted to understand Paris Robinson level of pain and suffering. And so I was like, I want to see hell. I want to see what people go through. And I got that, hours of it. And on the other side of then feeling this immense love and gratitude for life, and just like everything is making sense now, I had this perception incorrectly that everyone should do it. It's like, all you need to do is drink this stuff, have it facilitated by somebody that you trust, which was absolutely something that I championed right off the bat, but that it would kind of take care of them from there, because that was my experience. I knew what to do afterwards. I knew what integration looked like, but I'd also been in this work for a long time before that. I then had the opportunity to interview a couple of people for the documentary on this, Anderson Todd, John Vervaeke, and Nadine Purdy. Nadine's a medicine woman. Anderson Todd he calls himself a connoisseur of altered states. And this guy is smart, man. Like, I would love to introduce you to him.
I'd love it.
Amazing wealth of information. He's a Jungian psychologist, and dives into all kinds of wisdom studies. So anyway, he was saying, we do need to be careful around this because it's such sacred medicine. And he was getting into these things, and I was like, yes. And then we started getting into, I think it was John Vervaeke who said, regulating it a bit, and my pang in my body was like, I don't feel like that's right, because once you start regulating something and then there are certifications from it, and then there's money in different ways attached to it, things get weird, and I was like, no, not that stuff. And then, so I was feeling a little bit like, I don't know where I stand when it comes to accessibility for plant medicines. And then recently I had this great opportunity to spend over a week with the medicine woman from Nosara. And she was training me more or less on becoming a combo practitioner in my future. And combo is a different form of plant medicine. It's non-hallucinogenic, goes through your lymphatic system, clears you out of all kinds of good stuff. It's also a very hard process to go through, but much shorter, and also legal here in the US and in Canada and probably lots of other countries. So anyway, she's starting a new podcast soon, not because she wants to start a podcast, but because she's been in this business for like 30 years now. She's a wise woman, and she has seen the issues that come with people calling themselves shamans after a 3-day certification. The amount of chaos that people go through in these experiences, the amount of space that needs to be held, the tether that you spiritually need to provide for these people, requires a lifetime of experience. And we're seeing more and more now deaths happen through plant medicines that I'm not going to say never, but didn't happen as frequently with now this new influx of medical tourism down into South America and parts of Africa. And it's this thing that we need to address now, because it is probably the quickest way to do shadow work, to really see these parts of yourself that you've been ignoring or completely forgotten, past life things, that absolutely wouldn't make sense to you as you're sitting in your office. And they come to you, and then afterwards, that integration piece, that's important as well. But that's a very solo journey. Get a psychologist, get a therapist, find peer support.
Get a coach.
And also, you have to do this work on your own too.
Yes.
It shows up in your everyday life. That's where the lessons were, like we had talked about before. So, I would say if you do want to get into ayahuasca, we did daime, which is a variant of ayahuasca. It's made the same way every single time, whereas ayahuasca, I believe, is created with some certain commonalities, but then there can be things like tobacco added to it, sort of like dealer's choice, whatever the shaman feels should go in the medicine. But daime is very consistent in the way that it's created. And where am I going with this? Plant medicine. Oh yeah. Use your intuition. Find a place, find a shaman that really knows what she's doing or they're doing. Mm-hmm. I would even argue to say, if they're really, really young, just be aware of the lack of life experience that person has, and just be ready to come to that experience knowing those things.
Yeah. I would add on to that too, just for the listeners, is ask yourself before even embarking on seeking this, is why am I doing this? Why do I desire to do this? Because I, like you, experienced a plant medicine journey just one time. And that was, I think for me, I have no desire to do it right now because I don't think that it's needed for me. Like I did a lot of clearing in that space. And actually I was at a very primed state to experience what I experienced. I got out of it. It was like the final little piece that just was kind of helped complete this process. I also want to say this is by no means is it you do this medicine, you do this plant medicine journey, and then things fix themselves. Like it opens up that door for you to then do the work on the back end of that. This is not a fix. This isn't a secret potion. This isn't a secret pill or just a secret anything really. It opens up a door, and if you're not ready for it, it can really fuck you up. And so my caution would be, why am I doing this? And have I actually done work prior to this to prime my spirit and my system to go to the next level?
Yes. If I could add on to that, like, I think one of the common misconceptions is that it's like a depression medication. You know, you take it and then you feel better, or like muted on the other end of it. You feel like everything's kind of okay and life is still the same. You have to be aware that it's going to make you feel way more.
I was just going to say, it enhances everything.
And you're going to have to kill off some parts of yourself that you saw no longer serve this current version of yourself. Just throwing a quick example. In my first journey where I sat with a medicine, it showed me this. I was like hearing my voice. I was just like making these noises, and it was my mom's voice. It was really freaking me out. And after a couple of purges, I then saw this long lineage on my Korean side of women who were repressed and suppressed and made small. And it was all around their voice, like speaking. And I know that my mom had this thing around her voice. You know, she speak great English, but she still had a little bit of accent, and she was really self-conscious around that. And I also inherited this thing around my voice from that lineage that I had no idea, no conscious awareness of. And it wasn't until I sat with this medicine and had to work through my mom's voice, which was weird, but cool, and start to hear it and start to like it. And then that's when I was like, I'm ready to start a podcast now. You know, I'm ready to hear myself. I'm ready to speak now, because I've been hiding, so afraid of how I sound from a physical level, and also not liking the resonance of my soul. You know, it's just such deep stuff. And so it required me to kill off a part of myself that gave me the illusion of feeling safety on the back end, you know, not showing up too much. And that was really hard, like so hard. Oh my gosh. The first couple podcasts that I did, this sucks. But I know that this is my lesson, and there's no regrets once you integrate the lessons. No regrets. Yeah. It does take work, but you never regret it.
True. So it's that commitment, that utter commitment to follow through on the other side of it. And ask yourself that too. Like, okay, I'm going to find all of this stuff. I'm going to find all of this stuff, but am I willing to follow through on the back end of this? Like, am I going to integrate this? Am I going to kill that part of myself that needs to die, really, in order for new life to be created? And trust me, I've gone through, you know, several different deaths since, well, you know, forever, but
yeah. And part of that
true deaths.
Part of that killing off process needs to be ceremonial as well. Like, mourn that version of yourself that was a triumph over your earliest past. That kept you safe and so great. Mourn that, celebrate that, and then you can birth something new.
Beautifully said. And thank you for bringing that up. And I do, the gentleman that you referred to, I would love to get connected with him if that's okay with you, because what he said about it's a sacred journey. I'm so passionate about the protectiveness of this sacred experience. By no means should it be broadcasted or talked about, or, you know, safety and trust is everything in this experience, whether you're using plant medicines or not. So being with somebody who's facilitating this journey that you trust and you feel safe with and that is kept sacred and protected in this space is ultimately important. I'm so passionate about that. I can't echo it enough.
This is not stuff to be fooled around with. Spirituality is, you know, in the new age community, which I was a part of for a while, it's all about love and light, you know, and you open yourself up so much that you can let in other weird things, you know, like get weird on you here, but like there are entities and things and negative attachments that are floating around that you can call in when you do these medicine. You can call them in during everyday life, but you're very vulnerable during those moments. So have like a series of warriors around you is like really, really crucial.
Yes, absolutely. Because in the spiritual realm, there's, like we know, there's entities on both ends, and some of those can be very destructive. So protection is key. And also, you know, just sanctity and questioning everything too. You're absolutely right. And that's why we have guides. That's why we have our spirit protectors. That's why we have our ultimate source to and our inner knowing. Like, is this good, or is this from the evil entities, like you said? God,
Right.
so good. So
Yay.
good. Okay. And now to get like stupid, that was like so deep. And I love where we went with that and all encompassing. And now I feel like this question is becoming so boring to me, but it is kind of interesting to ask it. I always ask the same question at the end of my show is, if you could receive any compliment, what would the best compliment for you be?
Oh,
It's a hard
I just got
question, right?
goosebumps.
Oh,
If someone said that I'm bringing hope and practicality to the dark spaces, to the darkness, that would be my greatest compliment.
that's beautiful. And I think you are doing that, by the way.
Thank you.
You certainly did it today.
Thank you so much. Well, that feels good.
I hope that gave you goosebumps too.
Yes.
And then really quickly, first is the documentary. When is this being released?
So it will likely be done in spring of 2022. So next year. We are manifesting to have this on a major streaming platform like Netflix. It's a really high quality documentary. We're working with an amazing cinematographer out of Toronto, Zachariah Montgomery, and he produces like National Geographic level stuff. So I'm so blessed to have to be able to work with him on this. And it's all about post-traumatic growth. We learn a lot about PTSD, how people are unable to cope after trauma, after adversity. Trauma can be a very small, or not small. It can be a trickle, slow, over many years. It can be one shocking thing that happens to you. We all experience trauma. It's just like, where is it? And then finding meaning in that, finding out why that's happened. That's just one of the tools. It's not exactly the whole thing, but we wanted to journalistically explore stories of people who have lived lives of post-traumatic growth, Paris Robinson being one of them, and pick apart the things that they intuitively knew to do to pull themselves out of it and to just be so much better on the other side of it. I mean, he's in a wheelchair now and he's like, I'm so glad this happened to me because look at my life now. Look what I've done. Look what people have done for me. And we wanted to explore more of that. That's a great other side of PTSD that we don't often hear about. Most people don't even know that exists. They know the stories of it, but to know that there is actually a framework around it and tools you can learn and to actually train yourself so that you can really be so much more thriving on the other side of it. That's not to say we don't have our downtimes. Those downtimes, like we mentioned before, are so pivotal in our growth.
Yes.
But those moments when we're in the underworld become shorter and less like a cosmic bitch slap, more just like a slap on the wrist.
Great way to say that. Yeah, they become less tormenting. Yeah.
So if you guys want to check out the teaser video, we do have that ready. You can go to posttraumaticgrowth.film, and it's like 3 minutes long. It's really cool. Check that out. And we'll also, if it's not on that streaming platform around that time, we're going to make it available online. We're not going to like gate it behind too much bureaucracy. It's such an important message to get out there. So yeah, just keep in tune for that. There's also a form on there. So if you want to be notified of when the release is, you can give us your email and we'll send you that update.
Beautiful. And where can we find you, Jessica?
So you can learn more. Well, you can find me on Instagram at Jessica Depatie _ That's DEPATIE _. And then we also are starting a new program in January 2022 called the Transformation Collective. it actually goes through all the astrological, the energies of the cosmos each month. And so we can learn, okay, what does, September bring us? It brings us a whole new vibe. We know it as back to school month, but astrologically it's Virgo, and it's about perfectionism. It's about getting organized. It's about, that shadow of perfectionism, being Instagram mom. So, overworking, the uninitiated maiden. There's all these like really cool energies and archetypes that we can learn about, so that when we go off and help other people, help ourselves, we can jive with the energies that are actually happening at that time.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I'm super into it, the astrology, because I know nothing about it, but when I stay tuned in, it makes you so much more aware of, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling, or how can I make this time? And by the way, September is my birth month, so.
Oh, hey, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, you're a server. Wow. You're What's a server. You're a giver. It's the archetype of the person that is here to serve humanity.
Literally,
with that comes overworking.
Yeah. hence the great protectors in my corner that say, Sarah, breathe. Totally. Remember all that you've accomplished up to this point. I'm like, yeah, but there's still so much to do.
Right. I'm a Virgo. It's happening. Yeah. So we all need to be more, we don't need to do whatever you want, but it's helpful. It's helpful to know about these energies so that we don't feel so alone in our shadows. It's like, actually the vibes of the world are like this. Let's learn about them. So you can learn more about that at transformationcollective.org. Perfect.
I'm going to link all of this stuff in the show notes, guys. And I like what you said there is like, so that you don't feel so crazy. You're normal. You're normal, quote unquote. Yeah. Oh, Jessica, this was amazing. Thank you so much. You taught me so much today. And if anything, I just connected with you on a personal level because we're very, very similar.
Oh, I can feel that. Yeah, we got some soul connection going on. Thank you so much for allowing me to share some of my stories and to geek out on the things that I like to nerd out on.
Yeah, we nerd out on the same stuff. So I hope that came through. And thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you guys soon. Until next time.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Ignite the Spark Within. If this podcast brought you value, or you think it would bring someone else value, please hit that share button. My mission is to reach and help as many people as I possibly can. And you just never know who could use that one good piece of information. And hey, if you have any topics, discussion questions, or ideas for future episodes, you can reach me directly at sarah@sparkflc.com and just write podcast in the subject line. And if you haven't already, please rate the podcast on your favorite podcast channel. This helps bring awareness to the show. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're alerted for all future episodes. Please go ahead and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're interested in pursuing coaching for yourself, you can visit sparkflc.com for more information.